Welcome to ProjectME, the podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, the founder of ProjectME, multimillionaire entrepreneur, former TV newscaster, money-making expert, female empowerment speaker, and self-proclaimed office supply addict. My mission is to take the mystery out of making big money. Every week on ProjectME, the podcast, I'll share success tips, strategies, and stories from other entrepreneurs, experts, and millionaires, showing you exactly how you can achieve your most exceptional life. Now let's get to it. You all know I love sharing my secrets of how I went from $17,000 a year to a multimillionaire. My top essential tool for managing my two successful businesses, plus my crazy life, is my paper planner. But not any random planner, specifically my Inner Guide yearly planner. The Inner Guide planner doesn't just organize my schedule, it helps me map out and discover my goals, dreams, self-care, and keeps my millionaire mindset on track. I want you all to get planning right away for 2019. So I arranged to get a special Inner Guide discount exclusive to my ProjectME posse. Go pick out your favorite yearly planner at inner-guide.com. And at checkout, use the code ProjectME 15% off, and you will receive 15% off your entire order. If you are driving or multitasking and can't write this down, the Inner Guide link and code is in my Instagram bio at ProjectME with Tiffany. And remember, as I always say, you are either planning for success or heading to failure. You are listening to the podcast ProjectME with Tiffany Carter. You guys, take a screenshot if you're loving today's episode and just tag me at ProjectME with Tiffany, and I'll be sure to share that in my stories and on Facebook. This way more people can get something out of the episode, and you can always tag a friend too who you think would really relate to it. All right, so I want to ask you guys a few questions. Do people often tell you that you are too sensitive, emotional, perhaps dramatic? That's my personal favorite. Or do you know someone who is? How about if I told you that this personality type is actually a massive gift? Well, today we have on Heather Dominick. She's the founder and leader of the Highly Sensitive Entrepreneur. She's appeared on Lifetime TV network and has been published in numerous books, including alongside the famous Deepak Chopra. Very cool. So what she does is she teaches spiritual and highly sensitive entrepreneurs how to use their unique personality type to make major money and impact. Really, really interesting. They connected us, Heather. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited. You guys, I just have to start by saying it's so weird how the universe works because, people will reach out or they have a publicist that reaches out to book people on podcasts, and someone on Heather's team reached out to me, and her whole thing is working with people of a highly sensitive personality type. And we'll get into what that is. And I already know I am an HSP. That's another term for it. And so it's just so interesting how all of that's in alignment. So without going on and on and on, Heather, can you start out by telling people what this highly sensitive person thing is all about?
Sure thing. Absolutely. So first of all, my area of expertise is really with what I refer to as HSEs. So that stands for highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And what my work is founded on is the research foundational work of Dr. Elaine Aron, who started her research in the 1990s and really identified through her work that there are 20% of us who are born into the world highly sensitive. And what that means is that your nervous system is literally wired differently than the other 80%, and wired differently in a way that you take in stimulation at a much higher level than someone who's not highly sensitive. So that is in all areas. That's in sight, smell, sound, information, something that might be slightly stimulating or not stimulating at all to someone who's not highly sensitive will be massively stimulating to someone who is. It's again, really that your nervous system registers input at a much higher level. And so the work that I do is about serving and supporting and mentoring highly sensitives who feel called to be self-employed. And because of our nature, we really need to approach everything about self-employment in a much different way than the other 80%.
Oh my gosh. That's amen to that. So a lot of people, including, myself previously, when I would hear the word sensitive, it like makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It almost is like in our society has become like almost kind of like an insult, would you say?
Absolutely, for sure. It's so interesting because what brought me to understand that I'm highly sensitive was a very, very dark night of the soul in my business. So I've been self-employed for 15 years, and I was probably just about at the 5-year in mark. I had brought my business across the $1 million mark for the first time, and I was absolutely overexhausted, overworked, and overwhelmed. And it really threw me into this dark place of questioning everything that I was doing. And through that questioning, I came to discover Dr. Elaine Aron, and through her work, learned that I was highly sensitive. I had never heard that term before. So once I learned about what it meant to be highly sensitive, it didn't surprise me so much that I was highly sensitive, but what really surprised me was how highly sensitive I was. Off the charts, highly sensitive. And so because I'm a true believer and I really teach in my foundational principles that your ideal client is a version of you, I took one of Dr. Aron's assessments into an in-person group of 25 women entrepreneurs I was working with at the time, had them take the assessment. And of course, again, ideal client version of you, every single woman in the room was highly sensitive. Now that didn't surprise me, but what did surprise me about that was how much they did not want to be highly sensitive. They saw it as a real negative label and a weakness. And that was really the beginning where I thought very clearly, something needs to be done here, because for those of us who are highly sensitive, we are literally coded to be excellent coaches, therapists, healers, any type of service-based practitioner, creatives. We need to be able to claim those abilities, use them as strengths, and approach everything in our business differently.
So did you have a completely different brand and business model prior to discovering this need in the entrepreneurial world?
Yes and no. So I was already approaching my business through a spiritual lens, if you will. So I was teaching marketing and selling from that perspective. And then once I learned about the highly sensitive component, that really fine-tuned the way that I approach my business, and then everything that I teach and mentor in my business now.
So would you say that when you incorporated, going after the 20%, right? 20% of people are highly sensitive, but then obviously I don't know what the percentage is of people who are entrepreneurs on top of it. When you went after that, like sub niche, if you will, did your business sustain that 7-figure mark?
It's so interesting. It absolutely did. And so much more easily. So the minute I started to change the way that I did everything in my business, there was definitely, let's say, a period of status quo. But then once I really got very clear about, okay, this is how I'm meant to work, then everything just absolutely continued to ascend and accelerate, but in so much more enjoyable way, and just so much more peace and so much more fulfillment.
So I do have a percentage of male listeners as well. So can males also be highly sensitive?
Absolutely. 100%. Dr. Aaron would say the same thing. And we definitely have men in the Business Miracles mentoring community. And I would say that there is definitely at this point a smaller percentage, not a smaller percentage who are highly sensitive, but a smaller percentage who are ready to really own and step into being highly sensitive. Because as you said, it's already somewhat of a label barrier for women to overcome. And then because of, our general global culture and expectations for men, that's even, that much more of a barrier.
Yeah, so true. I mean, given that, I've been an entrepreneur a long time like you, 11 years. And prior to that, I was in, the corporate world, the rat race, however you want to call it. And in that area, and that's, as in the pharmaceutical area, so big industry, they do make you take a lot of personality tests, like the Myers-Briggs, like a lot of those tests. But what I found interesting when I was looking at your bio is I have never worked with a corporation or consulted for a big company that ever had me take any sort of quiz or any sort of test to determine if I'm a highly sensitive person. So does one exist?
Absolutely, for sure. So there's all of the assessments that Dr. Elaine Aaron has developed, and then the assessment that I've developed in addition to Dr. Aaron's work, which is really, again, for the entrepreneur. And honestly, corporations really should. They would be like so much better off if they understood how to really use the highly sensitives who are, in their midst, if you will, instead of, again, just this ongoing cultural, stigma of what it means to be sensitive.
So you guys, I have to share this story that's completely relevant. It's also a confession. So like I was saying, in the pharmaceutical industry and also when you're on air, at a network, like, a bigger network like NBC, CBS, like I was, they do as part of like the onboarding process, meaning hiring process, they do give you all these types of assessments. I don't know, is it to see if you're crazy or just to see, if you'd be a good match with the other team? Who knows? I'm not an HR person. Who knows why? But I learned early on, maybe it's through society, maybe it's through what I overheard other people saying who are in, management positions. They wanted like the Myers-Briggs test, and I won't go too far into it, but it's one of the main things is determining if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Well, I knew based on society, I'm not saying facts, I knew that they wanted extroverts as salespeople. I knew that I would likely not get hired or would likely not get promoted if I took the test honestly. There's a shit ton of questions on this test. And I literally embodied an extrovert because I knew I wasn't one and made sure I took the test and answered like an extrovert would instead of owning what I am, which is an actual really rare personality type. I'm an INFJ. And so I'm sharing that to talk to you, Heather, because I'm sure you've seen that. It's not just entrepreneurs, it's also people like in the corporate world too, right?
Absolutely. I so appreciate this story on so many levels. But one is that part of my teachings that I've created is what I refer to as the HSE coping mechanisms. And there's 3 coping mechanisms that I've identified. There's the coping mechanism of pusher, the coping mechanism of hider, and the coping mechanism of combo platter. So the pusher is a lot of what I'm hearing you describe in your story, which I can definitely relate to. I'm a recovering pusher, and that's what had me in my dark night of the soul, because I knew what was needed to create quote unquote success. And a pusher will absolutely do what an 80%er can do, but it will come at a very high cost. And I think I remember reading for you, like you had surgery of some sort, and that was like the only time you got some time to yourself. That is pusher material 100%. And that's what we'll do as highly sensitives, because nowhere along the lines, did anyone teach us, oh, here's what this means to be highly sensitive, and here's how you can really thrive in this world. So we develop these coping mechanisms to try to deal with it, to try to manage it. But it's only coping. Meanwhile, when you can really own who you are, like you said, you can move out of coping and into massive creation.
So what is the coping mechanism of hiding? Is it hiding?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
So when it comes to especially being an HSE, someone who tends towards the coping mechanism of hiding, they will find anything and everything to do but what's needed to move their business forward. So they will get the laundry done. They will take care of their neighbor's hamster. They will make sure that the entire house is clean, or that their marketing materials and website looks beautiful. But when it comes to actually doing what needs to be done to market and sell, suddenly they're like, oh, I just don't have time for that. And that's the way that the coping mechanism of hiding is very sneaky and very insidious.
So then how could a highly sensitive entrepreneur ever make any money if they're constantly in one of those coping skills areas?
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I've developed the teaching and what I refer to as the HSE coping cycle, so that you understand what happens to throw you into these coping mechanisms, and more importantly, how you can make alternative choices. So the only reason we're coping as highly sensitives is, again, because no one has yet taught us how to really be able to manage our sensitive nature. So I really refer to the Business Miracles mentoring programs as a retraining. You have to really learn about how to see yourself differently, how to see business differently, and how to approach marketing and selling differently, so that you don't get, sucked into the coping cycle.
Because I do feel that people with that highly sensitive personality, or if you're married to one or dating one, you're going to probably relate to a lot of what we're talking about. Or you might even have a friend or a mom or someone. You'll be able to pick up on that. It's that personality type gets overwhelmed very, very easily, right?
Absolutely, because that's the stimulation that I was speaking about. So along those lines, my research, I've developed what I refer to as 12 top HSE shadows and 12 top HSE strengths. And overwhelm is absolutely the tip top of those shadows, because we will experience overwhelm very easily. And you need to be able to learn how to be proactive in managing your energy, so that you don't just react into overwhelm, but instead you're able to access one of your strengths, such as intuition is absolutely a strength for those of us who are highly sensitive. And as you learn how to do that more and more, that's what's really going to serve you in your business. You can operate from those strengths and you'll be so successful.
So you do feel that someone who has that highly sensitive personality can play with the other 80% of the population in the business world and succeed?
Well, it's so interesting, because I love that phrase, can play with the other 80%. And I would say yes and. So yes, we can absolutely be successful in business. I see it in and out every day for all of the HSEs that I mentor. And you're going to be in a little bit of a different playpen. Your business is going to look different than the other 80%, but that doesn't mean that it can't generate and create success in a way that's a match and works for you.
I will say, and you guys, you can let us know, comment, go to Instagram, let us know, if this resonates with you, so we can bring people who have been kind of embarrassed about this or had any shame around it, out of the shadows. I mean, I just shared myself, and obviously Heather's also highly sensitive. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that there's so much material and courses and teachings out there that come from someone who isn't that personality type. And that may be why they're not resonating with you. Or for me, I'll give an example. Okay. And he's very popular. I'm not putting him down at all. Gary Vaynerchuk. Okay. Very popular in the digital marketing space. I admire what he's done, etc. I cannot listen to his podcast. And I've only read half his book, and I'm not picking it up again. It's overwhelming to me. He's the opposite probably personality type to me. So Heather, do you see things like that are clues that someone's highly sensitive?
Absolutely. I'm just nodding my head as I'm listening to you, because absolutely spot on. So if you're not going to go into a coping mechanism, especially pushing, then you need to be able to learn to identify what does and doesn't work for you. But that doesn't mean either yes or no. Right? I always emphasize in teaching both and versus either or. So if there's an 80%er who's successful in their 80%er way, but they don't resonate with you, that's fine. But it is important that you then do the work to find a teacher or mentor who is aligned with you, who can really celebrate who you are as a highly sensitive, can speak your language, and can find the path of empowerment for you. Because again, as a highly sensitive, you really have these amazing traits. One of the things that Dr. Aaron refers to when she talks about those of us who are highly sensitive, she says that we are here to be the royal advisors. We're here to be the royal advisors to the 80%. So that's why we are excellent coaches, therapists, communicators, educators, creatives. We have a role to fulfill, and it'll make it very difficult for you to fulfill that royal advisor role if you're busy pushing or hiding or combo plattering.
I love the combo platter. It's like, yes, I'm all the above. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And, without, having known you before, Heather, and I had to kind of figure out a lot of the stuff on my own, because I've been an entrepreneur for such a long time. This definitely wasn't talked about. I went into that coping mechanism of pushing until it actually got me very sick. I mean,
right.
Like borderline death sick.
Right.
And I'm still in recovery for what's happened to my system from pushing.
Right.
So it really doesn't work. It can look like it's working, right? Until it doesn't. So you can have health consequences from it.
Absolutely. It's one of the major HSE shadows that I've identified, which is digestive issues or overall health problems. You are far from the only one that I've heard, myself included, who working against your system has put you in a dire situation health-wise. It is more common than you know.
Yeah. So anyone who, you guys are listening and you're nodding your head like, oh my God, this is me. Where would you recommend, Heather, would be their first step to go to get more information on this?
Absolutely. So if you are resonating, then I recommend that you go to hsequiz.com, and that's where you'll find an actually very friendly self-assessment. And at the end of the assessment, you'll find out if you are somewhat or super, or like me, super uber HSE. And depending on where you fall, you'll receive what I refer to as an HSE success guide. And that guide will teach you how to begin to work with your somewhat super or super uber HSE tendencies so that you can really begin to step into that process of looking at and being in relationship with yourself and your business differently.
And I'll make sure you guys at that link and, everywhere you can find Heather will be in the show notes. So being an entrepreneur requires, excessive levels of tasking and doing, especially when you're starting out, because you don't necessarily have the revenue yet to hire help. What do you say to people who are wanting to start a business, have a business, they don't yet have the revenue to hire help, and there just is a lot of stuff you have to do. It's just part of having a business. What do you say to those people who are highly sensitive? Because they're going to go into that coping cycle pretty fast.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why I would say my first two foundational principles in my 6-month business mentoring program are most important. So the first one is about energy management, and I'll talk about that in a second. And the second is about becoming friends with time. So when it comes to energy management, in that foundational principle, I teach 4 very highly effective, practical, tangible tracking tools that you can use so that you're managing your energy proactively rather than what happens for a lot of highly sensitives. You've gotten used to reacting to the energy that comes at you. So those tools have made all the difference for me and, again, thousands of HSEs that I've mentored. And then the second, which is becoming friends with time, is you take those energy management tools and you begin to apply them to support you with, for lack of a better way of saying it, planning. And as HSEs, there's 2 primary aspects when it comes to time and organization that we need to be willing to embrace about ourselves. One is that we work best in small, doable steps. And second is that one of our HSE strengths is that we are visionary. We are massively visionary. We can really see that bigger calling that we have or that big vision for even those that we serve. And so that strength can really end up working against us. And we want to rebel against those doable steps. So I teach tools in that foundational principle that support you in just focusing in first 30 days at a time, then a week at a time, and a day at a time, so that you're getting to that big vision without getting overwhelmed by really being able to chunk it down into doable steps.
What scares myself, and I know other people who are in the corporate world who are also highly sensitive, and a few other entrepreneurs that I know that I have worked with, because like you said, like attracts like. So, that I've worked with is the time thing. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think this also impacts people, who aren't highly sensitive too, because there's such a time pressure anyway. We're seeing so many people on social media oh, I made $1 million in my first year. I'm having $10,000 months. And so there's all this time pressure. And when you're highly sensitive and you have to manage your time and energy, compared to someone who isn't, who can just like a Gary Vaynerchuk or Tony Robbins. I mean, he's definitely not highly sensitive.
No,
someone who can just keep going and going and going. And I swear he wears like a diaper on the stage. He never leaves to pee. It's unbelievable. And so they can keep going. And we can tend to compare ourselves to those people. And it's well, how do you get through the weeds of all that time thing? Because that adds a whole nother heaping dose of stress to the mix.
Absolutely. It's so interesting that you should zero in on all of this. I teach 2 in-person training retreats a year for members of the Business Miracles community. And I'm getting ready to teach one very soon. And it's all on the topic of comparison and how that really works against us as highly sensitives, because no matter what lens of comparison we look through as HSEs, we come up into the space of not enough. So rather than trying to figure out what you can do to be that Tony Robbins, it's really about calling your energy, calling your power back, getting very clear about who you are, how you're here to serve, what your version of success is meant to look like, and then being able to really anchor into that. And then that really impacts how you relate with time. And when you're really on that genuine, authentic path of how it is that you're here to create, how it is that you're here to contribute, suddenly you're actually able to get more done in less time. And it's because you really pull back from that rat race, right? Like that you were talking about, because we take ourselves wherever we go. So if we were in the rat race in corporate, we'll most likely try to bring that into our entrepreneurial world as well. But the awesome aspect of being an HSE is that you get to create your business and your life by your design, but you have to be willing to really own who you are as that highly sensitive and stand strong in that difference.
Yeah, and I can say I'm a great case study because ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, that's my second company. It's not even a year old. And I created it. One was the main reason was to give back to all you guys, all the things I've learned and help you not make all the mistakes I've made. But it was also to create a company of what it looks like for me without realizing it, but honoring who I am and really embracing who I am, and therefore helping all of you guys embrace who you are. But it really is an interesting case study when you say, we take ourselves. Like if I look at my first company that still exists, that's the pusher. I called it the driver, right? I called it the driver. And when I'm looking at a lot of things that I've learned now about myself and like embracing, I'm an INFJ, I am an introvert, like I am, even though people don't think I am. Yeah. I'm just highly socialized, I like to say. Yeah. But when you look at my company now, you're right. It's definitely a balance, and it is managing the patience of things. Yes. Okay. It's a long game, you guys. Entrepreneurship's a long game anyway. I don't care. I don't have to make $1 million in my first year. Who cares? What if year 5 you make 10? Would you rather have made 1 in your first year and then 1 each year after, and now you're at 5 million, or at year 5 make 10? You have to look at it differently. Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And it's also about values. And with the HSEs that I mentor, when I really work with them to get clear about what are their values, is it time? Is it energy? Is it money? And what's the order of those 3? There's so many HSEs who are like, oh my gosh, like I've been driving my business from somebody else's values. That's not what's important to me. This is what's important to me. And once you get clear on that, then again, you can design so that your business works for you. And the way that I look at it is exactly how you started this podcast, which is that the universe works in amazing and mysterious ways. And you are literally working against the universe when you're working against your own design. So stop trying to be someone that you're not. Step into the flow by really embracing who you are. For people who are listening that they're not highly sensitive, but they're like, oh my God, this is my wife, or this is my boyfriend, or oh my God, this is my sister. First off, you're doing a disservice if you don't share the episode, because it would probably make them actually tear up to feel so validated as I did the first time, that I recognized, oh, I'm not like kind of a weirdo. Like I am a thing. I'm actually a really cool thing. So first off, share it. But what else would you say for people who have a good friend or a significant other that's highly sensitive? Are there any tips that could, help them relate to them more? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely share this episode for sure, and be willing to sit down and listen to it with your friend, your loved one, even your colleague, because I will tell you, understanding that I'm highly sensitive made all the difference in my marriage. It changed everything. And suddenly my husband could stop wanting me to be more like he is, and I could stop feeling like there was something wrong with me because I wasn't. And the harmony that was able to be created and the way that we were able to drop so much conflict has been amazing and tremendous. So it is the best thing that you can do to share this episode. And, a positive thing, there's a lot of positive things about highly sensitives, but I want to say this in terms of time, whether in terms of time and work and efficiency, right? Sometimes people who fall in that 80% category, they spin their wheels. Like just because someone's busy and being a spaz and doing a million things all the time, that doesn't mean that that's controlled and streamlined, focused energy, right? They have pros and cons, so to speak, too. They can be all over the place. The beautiful thing about, being highly sensitive is once we like calm ourselves down and focus, we get more done in that short duration than anybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It goes back to that royal advisor role. We are here to be the advisors to those 80%ers. They need us, but we have to be willing to show up and be seen in our strengths for who we are so that we can literally add that royal advisor aspect to all kinds of productivity and all kinds of creation.
I love that. And in the workplace where you don't get to like control your environment. I mean, you can definitely do things to make it more pleasant. But if you are not someone who has their own business, what do you recommend or any tips for highly sensitives to cope in a corporate atmosphere?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, really just get to know yourself, right? Like begin the process, the path of not only accepting that you're highly sensitive, but embracing that you're highly sensitive. And then take that embracement, if that's a word, into the tasks that you have to do as part of your corporate job. So it doesn't mean that you can't get things done again, but you can begin to go about them differently. And half the time, a manager, a project leader isn't going to really care how you get done what you're supposed to get done. They just want it done. But if you can set it up so that it's working more in, alignment with your nature, with your strengths, you'll be happier. You'll be, have a greater sense of peace, and you will again be more productive. You don't have to tell anyone, right? You don't have to shout it from the corporate rooftop, but really take it in for yourself and stop trying to work or take care of the tasks like, the 80% are in the cubicle next to you.
And another tip I would say that I just happened to learn on my own through years of pain and trial and error in the corporate world is don't volunteer for things that don't feel good or sound horrible. Okay.
Brilliant.
Like an example for me is like, I don't like cheesy networking events. I mean, I don't think anyone likes cheesy networking events, but even good ones take a lot of energy for me. And I would have to really, really want to go to those. But a lot of people love it. And those people, they get off on it, they schmooze, they're laughing, whatever. And that doesn't work for me. So I finally stopped volunteering, to go or saying yes when that was something, I wasn't being paid to do. It was outside, the size and scope of my position.
Yeah, brilliant. Really goes back to knowing yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's not worth it. It's just saying no is a complete sentence. And that's like one of my favorite things to say is no. And a lot of people are afraid to say that in entrepreneurship. They're afraid of not getting the client, not getting the business or the opportunity, or in the corporate world, not getting a promotion or your boss being pissed at you. But what I've discovered is people respect you more when you say no sometimes than saying yes all the time.
For sure. And people respect you when you really know where you excel and you don't try to be everything to everyone, but you really own the gifts and the skills that you have.
I really enjoyed this talk. This is so crazy how we got paired. This really is.
I love it.
This is another example, you guys, of how truly the universe is at work and pairs people. I've never talked about like any of this stuff on any of my posts. I don't think I've talked about it anywhere else. Sometimes when I give, when I'm do paid speeches and stuff like that, I'll mention my introvert line, and I'm a highly socialized introvert, but I don't really go into it because that's not what people pay me to teach and such. So the fact we got aligned today is so cool. I love it.
I love it so much. This has been so great. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on. And again, you guys, if this helped you feel validated or you're sharing it with someone who you know will just feel a sense of like ease and peace just from listening to this, please, please, please give Heather and I a really good written review on iTunes. This way we can keep the show going. It's not free to produce, and we can have on more great guests like Heather and help people live their best lives. Thanks so much for coming on, Heather.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.